Hey guys, Jordan here. In this video, I'm going to discuss whether or not a single raw photo is good enough for real estate photography. Alright, so in my opinion, a single raw photo for most interiors is not sufficient or doesn't have sufficient data to be able to produce a deliverable to your customer. Now, depending on your camera settings, if you're using external flash, you may be able to accomplish something. And actually, I've talked to some people on YouTube, and they've been able to, with their camera settings, their flash, they underexpose it a bit, compensate with flash, and get more detail out of the windows on interiors. And ultimately, I think that's going to save a whole lot of time. If you can figure out a way to shoot single exposure raw, you're not waiting for your images to blend. You're not doing that HDR part of the process. But from my experience, when I've tried, or when I do try, I still try. Typically there's not enough data in exterior window shots. Now, it also depends on how bright the inside of the property is compared to outside. If there's a really big difference in brightness, if it's an overcast day, you might be able to see right out through the windows, perfectly fine at a 0 exposure value. But having that -3 to 0 and +3 is a much safer way to shoot real estate photography, unless you know what you're out there trying to get, and you can kind of gauge and look in camera. And then know your camera, right? Because depending on the file type, which I definitely recommend shooting raw, you're going to have way more information in the shadows and the highlights. I will mention one other thing, that typically, with interior shots, it's not just about the highlights and getting detail outside of the windows, but also that +3 exposure, getting details in shadows, is really important as well. Because you'll see, if you take a single exposure raw at 0 and you go, shadows at 100%, highlights at 100%, and then you do the same test with an HDR image, usually, if it's a single exposure, those shadows start to fall apart really quickly, and you'll start to get some gnarly magentas and greens, and some of, depending on how dark it is and what your ISO setting is, it'll fall apart faster with a higher ISO setting. But from my experience, I definitely recommend shooting at least 3 images, getting different ranges. But if you're very experienced and you know what you're going after, and you know how your camera performs and what settings do well, you can get away with a single exposure real estate photography. Let me know your thoughts. If you do single exposure, let me know what your settings are, what your process is. I'm curious to see if most people are doing it similar. Maybe I'll post the one. I had a conversation with one, and he sent me some examples of his work, and he, I would say they're appropriate to send to customers, right? But anyways, that's gonna do it. Those are just my thoughts on single exposure raw, and whether I think they're sufficient for interior real estate photography. If you're interested in learning more about the real estate photography business, you can check out my free workshop. The link is in the description below. If you got value out of this video, hit the thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel, as we consistently put out content around real estate photography just like this. And as always, thanks for watching. We will see you guys on the next one.